So welcome, everybody. There may be a few other people coming on, but so this is our first attempt, excuse me, at an ad hoc meeting. In other words, we don't have any particularly important agenda to address, but so we're much more open to answering questions and addressing individual needs if you're feeling like you're happy to share with whoever happens to be on this call. Our intention was kind of twofold. One is to try to help give specific helpful information to individuals who are struggling with these concerns about housing for family members. And the other one was equally important, and that is to start identifying reoccurring issues, systemic issues that will require kind of a broader, maybe longer time frame to resolve. And so Michelle has volunteered to kind of keep track of some of that, as well as to kind of answer some questions. So our number one presenter source of information is Michelle Brophy. She's been working at the Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental Disabilities and Hospitals for quite some time, primarily working on this issue of helping to resolve people's housing issues, primarily at a systemic level, but also at a personal level if that becomes necessary. So tonight we're going to basically open it up to people who have a particular question that they want to address. I see David is there. If any of you ever want to move to Canada, talk to him before you do that. He may.
So thank you, John. And I just wanted to say, so Betty Murray, who is also on the board of the plan and has worked for the state for years and years and knows the ins and outs of long-term care, has agreed to co-host, and I'm bringing in a third host with Anne LeClaire. She graciously has been participating in these meetings, and she works for the division or for the Department of Behavioral Healthcare, Developmental Disabilities and Hospitals, and she's knows a lot about the services and policies that can help us too. So I think between the three of us, our idea is to listen to you. Anne wrote a little write-up about this, and she said, we want to hear about your ideas for housing in the community, housing preferences, and housing dreams. And that really does like wrap it up in a nutshell what we're trying to do. I think many of you have been on the monthly calls. You've heard about the different types of housing that are available across the country and in Canada. So now we want to put what we've heard into action. So we thought the best thing to do, because what we keep hearing from all the presenters is that we're working with one individual at a time. So that's what we figured we'd start doing. So hearing from you, what interests you, what are the preferences you have for housing, and we're making a list, and we're going to see how we can get that done for you. We're hoping that, John will let us do this once a month so we can come back and I can get people's emails and phone numbers, and we can reach out offline as well. But we really want to gather information so we can go meet with our housing partners and see what we need to do for the next step. Because I've heard from a lot of people and they think these conversations are wonderful, but how do we do it in Rhode Island? So our goal tonight is to start the process for doing it in Rhode Island. Anne or Betty, do you have anything else to add before we get started? Okay. So
you said that well, except that you actually wrote all that. I just put it in the letter.
You made it sound better.
So some folks are muted, some are not. If you want to start this conversation, please unmute yourself and let's, just don't be afraid to speak up and we'll pay attention.
Hi, my name is Karen Rasnick. I have a daughter, Rachel, who is 27 years old. She lives at home. This is my first meeting, and I'm just starting to explore different options for housing. She is kind of independent, but she needs a lot of supervision. And I'm looking at some type of, I'd like to maybe purchase a house and have some of her friends, have already, we've talked about it, maybe being able to purchase a house and use it as a group home with staff coming in and pooling all of our resources together. I live in Barrington and she goes to a program called Looking Upward in Newport. So we were thinking of maybe something on the bus route somewhere between Barrington and Bristol, because everybody lives in Barrington to Bristol, Warren, and that way we'd be able to be close to them. And I don't know how to approach anybody or anything.
Okay, so we can talk to you about housing. We've had several people talk about having multiple individuals live together in a house. I mean, I'm looking at Ann because I don't think we would want to consider, we wouldn't want to necessarily call it a group home. I mean, I think back to when I was, graduating from college. Living with my friends and sharing an apartment and just making sure the services are available. So we actually talked about that in a meeting this morning about how you can blend services to help people have the care they need and being more flexible around that. That's definitely an option. Would what I'm interested in finding out more about is how purchasing a house would work, as far as, would it be in the individual's name? Would it be in a group's name? Would it be in a trust? I think those are questions we probably want to find out too from a legal team to see,
I have no idea
how it would impact benefits. But this is great. It's good to know what people are thinking about.
because a bunch of us talked about it, and we'd like to be able to have our girls live together because they all know each other and they're friends and they get along. But none of us can afford to do it on our own.
Yep.
Yeah, I've heard this before with people who wanted to then not only share resources, but then the families could help provide supports as well. They could take turns.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting model, and we at the department would need to help answer some of the questions about what does it mean if that happens, how does it need to be set up to not affect other benefits?
Right. And right now,
How do pooled resources work?
right.
We definitely are interested in helping to define all of that and figure it out. Can I also give you a big shout out for thinking about transportation up front? So often things happen, people choose,
Yeah.
they can't move anywhere, can't go anywhere because they don't have transportation.
I want her to be on 114 so she can walk to the bus, she can go to supermarket, she can go shopping. She's very mobile, so I want her to be able to have access to all of that.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Karen, welcome aboard. I'm calling in from our first time meeting. I'm calling in from Vancouver Island, British Columbia, but I've been involved in this whole realm of the relationship between housing and service supports for almost 50 years now. And one recommendation that I would make is whatever we do, and I'm just gonna share one. John, can you let me have screen sharing, or Michelle, can you let me have screen sharing? I just want to show one slide.
So you tell me what to do, David, and I will do it.
Turn me into a co-host.
All right. And where do I do that from?
open up. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll do it without this.
Oh, okay.
Many years ago, we were developing cooperative housing, scattered cooperative housing. One small warehouse conversion that involved about 17 units of housing. And we had established the principle of separating the provision of housing from the provision of support services. And Michelle, that comes back into your reflection, which is two things. I would absolutely recommend that whatever pathway forward you take, to make sure that the support service doesn't own the house, so that people can have the opportunity, if they want to, eventually to move and not lose their supports, or to change to change their supports and not lose their house. And that principle, which we established back in the early 1980s, has been adopted state after state after state, so that people can have choice in terms of where they live, and can have choice in terms of who provides their day-to-day supports. And you can still do some combined kinds of things, but it gives the families and the people themselves some degrees of freedom and choice and opportunity that don't exist when the building and the supports are tied together. And so Karen, when you were talking about, for example, that your choice for your daughter, led you to think very clearly and very deeply in terms of transportation and locality and so on. Somebody else might say, I want to be right downtown. I want to be near the arts community. Or somebody else might say, I want to be close to my work. And as long as we don't lock people in a way that makes it impossible for them to move without losing their supports, or impossible for them to change their supports without losing their home, it's a good strategy, because it keeps things flexible. My other recommendation would be to avoid purpose building a housing solution. To use generic housing as much as possible. So and we've talked in this group pretty extensively about some strategies for doing that, some ways of doing that. And hang on for a second.
So while David's pausing, I just want to add a kind of a parallel thought, and that is one of the things that we've learned, and I'd like to emphasize, is that housing is very important, but you need to look at housing as a transitional process. In other words, very few people end up moving out of home into a place and then staying in that place for the rest of their life. Most of us have moved numerous times for numerous reasons, not the least of which is the disruption and the breakup of relationships. And so although at the moment it may appear that these young women are all good friends, it's not always the case that those good friendships last forever. And as you think about who's going to be living where and how, that you recognize that it's got to be flexible enough so that when these relationships become frayed, it's possible to untangle them without creating serious harm to any individual,
Right.
or to harm to the solution that you thought you had created.
Yeah. And Karen, I'll also let you know that this is none of this is spoken with judgment or criticism, or it's just long experience speaking.
Yeah.
But the other thing is there are ways, and Michelle can point you to it as well, to create solutions pretty rapidly, especially if we're not purpose building.
Yeah, and so I really want to hear from more people tonight, because I have to say, we do have connections. So we've talked about community development corporations who create affordable housing for people, and we can add services. We've talked about co-ops, we've talked about home ownership. There's a lot out there. So if the people on this call, and thank you, Karen, I think it's great. I actually have heard from other parents that have the same ideas. So the more I can take and bring back to the community, then I can give you information. I want to see, and what we all want to do is try to see what it is that people are actually interested in. And I do agree with John, like we shouldn't think of housing. I was working with another family, and at the moment in Rhode Island right now, a lot of people think we have group homes or we have shared living arrangements. And there's a lot more. We can do affordable housing, we can do supportive housing, we can do co-ops. So there's a lot at our fingertips, but knowing where everybody's interest lies can help make the connections, because there's a ton of connections that need to be made. I just want to stop where you're at and not stop where I'm at. So please jump in. This is wonderful information. So who's next? I guess I'll add my little commercial for the importance of the housing choice voucher. If this is your first meeting, we can send out information on how to apply for a housing choice voucher. The housing choice voucher or the mainstream vouchers, they are federal programs that allow an individual to pay 30% of their income for rent. And it's wonderful. It makes housing affordable in any community, and you get to pick the apartment that you're interested in. And as long as the landlord is willing to take the housing choice voucher, which most are, then a person can stay there for as long as they want. They can move to a different community. Actually, once you've had a housing choice voucher, you can move anywhere in the country. So it actually gives you flexibility to live integrated in the community. So if people haven't done it, there's not enough vouchers in the state of Rhode Island, or actually anywhere in the country. So your best bet is to get on a waiting list, because the wait could be anywhere from 3 to 10 years. But if you don't apply, then you never get to the top of the list. So I just think it's the best thing for anyone is to actually apply for the vouchers. And we have the list of the housing authorities depending on where you want to live. And there's a voucher program that you can complete online, an application, and sign up for several different housing authorities. So if you haven't done that, again, I would highly recommend it. But I've gone on about the housing. What other types of housing are you interested in us researching for you tonight? Or for you, I don't know if everybody, you could be from a service provider, if there's things that the clients you serve are interested in, if you have questions about housing.
Well, the other thing I was interested in was, well, I don't know if it's better for me to purchase a house maybe, or I don't know how it would be if I built an apartment over my garage that was a separate residence with its own little kitchen and bathroom. I've heard some people who do that also. So I'm at the very beginning all of this. And if you get a voucher and you don't use it right away, do you go back to the bottom of the list if you're not ready to use it?
Every housing authority has a different way of administering them. Some they just skip over you if you're not ready for it, and they go to the next person in line. Some put a person back at the bottom of the list, but it all depends on the housing authority.
Melanie had her hand up.
Hi, everyone. And I'm sorry for coming in late. I was driving as quickly as I could to get on this call because I have so many questions. I actually think, Karen, you and I may have just met virtually last week through texting about the same idea. So that's kind of interesting. So my question is basically, my daughter's going to transition out of K through 12. She's at the Groton Center currently. and we're looking at alternatives, and we're thinking about, I'm not sure if this was already covered, so I apologize if it was, and I'll watch earlier. We're really looking into how we could potentially purchase a house with other families and then have services come in. And like, for example, have a physical therapist come in or an occupational come in and use our funding as whether it's 3 families or 2 families. So I've been telling everybody, this dream, I'm just going to repeat the dream until it comes true, basically. And it would be to have my daughter Talia potentially living with 2 or 3 other young ladies that are around the same age, pool our funding together, have somebody that could come in and help them in the morning. They could have breakfast and lunch together. And, I'm always a fan of having a theme. So, they go grocery shopping in the morning and then they have Taco Tuesday that night for family. It would be a place where if people wanted their child to stay, they could, but at least we would know that we had this central location that we purchased. But I'm not sure like legally how to do that. Is it better to try to create a nonprofit, get funding? Should we just buy it? I don't know. I have so many questions. I probably could monopolize the entire meeting, but that's kind of my main question and the comments that I'd love to hear from other families of what they're doing and what's worked and what steps we should take.
And,
That's a lot.
we could get this information for you. Again, I told the people at Rhode Island Housing do affordable home ownership. They have a program for first-time home ownership. They have rental programs that they run. So I told them we were having this meeting. I was going to bring back all of the questions and then we'll connect you up with the people at Rhode Island Housing.
But for something like that, would the home have to be purchased under like my daughter's name? Because we own our home, so we wouldn't necessarily be first-time home buyers.
Yeah, I just mentioned it as one of the programs they run, but that you could also work with a community development corporation. Before you came on, we were talking about, I'm not sure what the implications are of having a home in a person's name on like their service package. So I would really want to talk to like somebody who has more knowledge, because we wouldn't want to see a person lose their Medicaid or their services because they owned a home. But I'm sure there's ways around it, like trust, that lawyers who are very much more smarter than I could tell us about.
So, Betty, I know you're on there. You're an expert in the world of Medicaid. Maybe why don't you just tell everybody about what the rules are about Medicaid eligibility and home ownership, and what the long-term consequences are of that reality.
To John's point and Michelle's, you have to be very careful. And Michelle probably summed it up best. You definitely need to find out if the house could be owned by a trust, because any assets that you have that are in the person's name can impact them to lose it. You're not supposed to have any more than $4,000 in an asset for basic Medicaid. Now, I don't know what the age limit is with the flipping, from schooling from Katie Beckett. There might be a window there because they don't look at parents' assets. So you do get to keep Medicaid benefits when you're in Katie Beckett. And then things change when you become an adult and you have your own property, because it does get scrutinized. And the other thing is any assets like the Able Trusts, any money that you have does get reviewed on how it impacts the benefits that a person receives.
I think it would be worth actually checking out the question about whether one's own home counts against that kind of asset counting. Our understanding from Joe Wachowski and other folks who've presented here is that it doesn't, so that people can own their own homes and not lose their supports. But it's worth checking out.
It definitely is worth checking out, because it might be as simple as how it's worded. It could be that simple.
Yeah.
And trusts are usually what they put houses in this state. Now, I don't know what other states they were talking about that are owning a house didn't impact a person.
And I
And-
see Deb Burton has her hand up. Deb, before you ask your question, Melanie, if you can type your email in the chat, then I can kind of connect with you offline too as well. And that's for anyone who has a question. If you just put your email in the chat, I'll make sure I have it. Deb, did you had a question?
I think it's a question. Deb Burton, RI Elder Info, and I have a particular interest in this area in relation to older adults who are caring for their adult children as they both age. And I think when it comes to housing, there needs to be an alternative for these adult children who, when their parents pass, that might be the first time that they're actually interacting with any kind of state agency since they were children. We don't have currently an accurate number of how many people that might be. There are some estimates. But I think, one of the concerns, and or not necessarily just when their parents pass, but when their parents need another higher level of care. There are many assisted living facilities where they will not accept parent and children in the same facility. And so as we look at this plan, I think it's also really important to consider the individuals with differing abilities as they age and what that might look like. And in listening to what everyone is saying here in relation to having a house with multiple individuals and then having support services come in, I personally love that idea. In the aging world, it's sort of the Golden Girls scenario. And it's not something that the state has regulations for as far as that kind of supported group living in small settings for the aging population. And I think if it's something that could be established for the individuals whose family members would be participating in that kind of thing in this group, I think it's also something that should be approached to RIDO in relation to our older adults, because smaller living is certainly a much better option in, maybe a large flat ranch house with a universal design. So I think, there's a multitude of opportunities here across the aging spectrum. I'm really glad to be able to be here tonight.
I want to say, for those who came in later, I'm Anne Clare. I'm with BHDDH. I have concerns about regulating something like this, and the lawyers might disagree with me, so this is my opinion. But if it's someone in their own home, even if the house is owned by a trust, that's not something we at the State Department would regulate. Melanie, you had mentioned maybe starting a nonprofit. That gets into more of an area where if it's an agency doing something, that would have to fall under some kind of regulation. But people who are choosing to live together, and I gave this example in a meeting I was in earlier today. When I was younger, I lived in a house with 6 people. People choose to live together. That the state shouldn't step in and say, now that you're living together, we now have a say in how you live. That's not our role. So what we do need to clarify is what's allowable with the funding and how does the funding work together. But I think this could fall very well under, if it's three people, 3 families that are self-directing services and figuring out how to mesh that, which is a model we already have. We still need to clarify how we share funding. But beyond that, what people choose to do in their own homes is really none of the state's business. We are meant to ensure that people are safe and are not being abused, neglected, or exploited. But that would be the extent of it. It would be very different from what we do with one of our provider agencies and how we license a group home, which is why, Karen, we don't want to use the term group home for what people are doing on their own. Those we license and we oversee, and we have on-site reviews. Laura Hayes from one of our places, so she can say that. She can tell you all about it. So we do want to make sure there's a distinction. And there is a rumor that went around, I don't know if it's still around, but 4 years ago when I started BHDDH, it was around, that if 3 people chose to live together, it became a group home. If it's not owned and operated by a provider agency under the auspices of BHDDH, it's not a group home. People have a right to choose who they live with and where they live. What we need to help with, and what we want to hear more of people who are interested in, is how do we answer the questions of what seem to be barriers just because we don't have the answers, such as impact on benefits or how to pool resources. Those are answers we don't have yet. That would be more guidance than regulation.
And I will say that there was a group that was interested in exactly what you were talking about, Deb. And Rhode Island Housing went to look at a site. The site didn't work for this one project, but that doesn't mean something like that still can't happen, where you create a community. It's actually building a community. It was more condos than anything else, but the idea you mentioned is something that is out there. But like Ann said, it's just not a regulated thing. It's just considered housing. So I see Casey has her hand up, and then Melanie after that. Casey? Oh, Casey.
Hello.
Hi, Casey.
I wanted to get clarification from something that Ann just said. So Ann, if I heard you correctly, if families organize to purchase a home that their individuals or loved ones benefit from, but if an agency comes in any capacity, so let me give you an example. We have a group of people that recently approached West Bay about starting to help them manage a home that they had set up under a board. They have a board and oversees it. And we are being very careful as to the extent of how they want us involved, because it sounds like right now they really only want an agency to help with ensuring staffing is in place as well as management. And then down the line, they are looking for eventual property management and well, financial management maybe as well too. But it sounds like what you just said, is there a line at which an agency can become involved where it does still keep the I would say not the onus, but the kind of crux of ownership on that trust and that board? Or does the minute an agency becomes involved and starts consulting in exchange for, you know, some sort of hiring of services, does that become therefore a group home per se?
No, it doesn't. The difference is that the agency is not owning and operating the group home. It's being hired to provide a service. So if you're being hired to provide a service, to me, whether an agency helps with staffing or people are doing it on their own through self-direction, it's the same thing. And in fact, this is something I've brought up previously, is could we have a model in our system where agencies just provide, they're like staffing agencies, because that is the biggest barrier for a lot of people who consider self-direction, is how to find staff, how to manage staff. What do I do if staff person gets sick and then there are no services? Can there be a model where, like the FIs handle fiscal things, can we have a model where an agency would handle staffing? Because if I know more people who would self-direct if they had their set staff who are doing things on a day-to-day basis, but they knew they had a number to call if someone was sick and or something happened and they needed someone to fill in. And even if they could have people they had met previously who were on a chosen list. So that kind of model, if you're just helping with staffing or even providing the services, just like you do through a day program, but you're providing supports to people who happen to live together, how is that different from providing day supports to anyone else who lives anywhere else?
So
You're still
Thank you, Ann.
providing day supports.
My interpretation of all of this stuff is maybe a little bit more simplistic, and that is, in the self-direction world, the employer of the staff is the person themselves, the individual. And that's where I think the firewall is between an agency and a self-directed model. I think once the agency becomes the employer of the staff, it may change. And maybe the best place to look for guidance on that is in Medicaid, in the home and community-based waiver section. There are some rules or some expectations about what the rights are of individuals, which include things like access, visitation, a variety of other variables that kind of define, I think, what independence should look like. And I think as long as those factors are built in, and um, the staff are still under the control of the individuals who live in the home, then I think it's not a group home.
Yeah, I think we need to
Connie
define
Souza
our-
has her hand up.
Yep, and
Sorry,
Meg
can I-
has her hand up too.
For those of us, I don't know whether we're at month 7 or month 8, but for those who have been with us throughout this series, what we have been highlighting have been creative, innovative strategies that are not known in Rhode Island, that have been successful elsewhere to provide inclusive housing and to provide more normalization for individuals with disabilities. You know, early on, when John and I started looking for something that would have that would continue the normalizing influence that we have always sought for our son Mark, we started looking at co-housing, which is a intentional community built or rehabbed by a group of people, but not a group of people with disabilities or their families. It's a group of people who may be business people and who share that interest, or a group of people who are interested in diversity, or a group of people who are interested in green renewable energy, etc. And our purpose in looking at that was that in being intentional, those people came together, designed what they wanted as their ideal living arrangement, and made a commitment to one another. In fact, at least in the past, when John and I were looking at co-housing, they would cook and eat together several times a week, or someone would cook on Mondays, someone would cook on Wednesdays, someone would make a brunch on Sunday morning. I don't know what they did, but the idea was they would come together frequently. The logistics of the building were set up so that people came together in a variety of ways through the day. And if it was a group of artists, there would be a studio that anybody could use, could sign up for time. And we actually participated with a group in doing some preliminary planning, and they were wonderful about incorporating Mark. I remember the first thing we went to felt so much like the rest of our life, where it was a week before Thanksgiving. They said, we'll have our own Thanksgiving dinner and, you know, do our planning meeting right after that. And everybody bring a symbol with you of something you're thankful for. And Mark picked out for himself what it was that he was thankful for. And he spoke about what was meaningful for him in his life, so that other people got to know him and he got to know the other people, because these are all people without disabilities who can be helpful to him. And by incorporating him in the planning process, they were making a commitment to befriend him, to create a circle of friends, as it were. The reason John and other parents created plan or adopted the plan model from Vancouver, tip of the hat to Canada again, David, is because we know the power of friendship. We know the power of relationships. Just in the last week, Mark always sends out Valentines to all of the people in his personal support network. And in doing that, he got feedback from several people. Someone knitted him a scarf, someone sent him some money, someone brought him a meal, someone sent him a letter. He, in reaching out to other people, he got a return in those relationships. We have neighbors who have been extremely kind to all of us. And so the night before Valentine's, after their lights were out, I went and pasted doilies and Valentines with messages all over their storm door. The next day, they came with their little 4-year-old daughter. We had a wonderful visit. They brought us a gift in return, and their daughter and I are going to make cookies before the next big holiday that we're celebrating. And you know, it's that interaction, that give and take, that we have been working at building over the last 7 months in the models that we've been discussing. Because none of you have said around the Thanksgiving table, gee, I'm really grateful for our house, but I think we need a property manager. And I know that we're different from our sons and daughters, but by golly, if typical neighbors, if intentional neighbors can pick up some of that slack, then isn't that much better than having hired help? Because it means that Mark or your son or your daughter has an authentic friend, someone who can help problem solve when we're not here anymore. And I'll get off my soapbox now, but if anybody's taking notes about what we're interested in, I'm still interested in exploring co-housing. And we're starting to have serious talks about what comes next for Mark. Sorry, hon. I know we
No,
didn't
that's
talking about
it's
this.
very important for people to hear, because we want to hear from all parents and individuals and what their dreams are. So that's definitely on the list of things. I know that Rhode Island Housing was here and they heard about that. So I think it's important to share. And
Thanks, Michelle.
that. It's definitely something, you know, I hate to say it, but we tend not to focus on community as much as we used to back in the day, where, I mean, growing up, we used to take turns with the families in the neighborhood who would make lunch for all the kids, and every, you know, parent got a day off. So I think it's nice to talk about bringing back community, and I appreciate you saying that.
Thank you. I just want to add that I'm grateful for all of the paid supports that Mark has as well, but that's not the sum total of his life.
Yep.
I just found,
Melanie's been waiting.
okay,
Sorry. Go ahead, Betty.
I just found an update. Assets just got updated February 2021. And it says one's primary home given the Medicaid applicant. This is long-term care benefits, which is the waiver program. One's primary home given the Medicaid applicant lives in the home or has intent to live there and has her home equity interest is no greater than 603,000 is also exempt. Equity interest is the amount of the home's value owned by the applicant. The home is also exempt regardless of any other circumstance if the applicant has a spouse residing there. This just got updated February 10th.
Wow, perfect.
So
Great.
I think it's coming to people's attention. And then there was another rule that also said that if aging parents, somebody asked about the aging parents with an adult child with disabilities, there also was a clause that the House the intention was that the house would go to a disabled adult. So therefore, like David said, it wouldn't count either. But I think what we were talking about is putting, buying a house with the person's name on it. And that's why I say, I think you just need to get the legal advice on the wording, but
Yeah.
you should be all set. I just wanted to clarify that one little piece.
And this, we'll
Based on-
make sure we get the legal information,
That's all it is. It's the legalese.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
that's all it is.
because no one wants to, none of us are lawyers unless there's a lawyer in the,
Exactly.
but we want to make sure we get that. So Melanie, you've been patient. Did you have another question or another
That's
comment or
Some
tell
were
us
actually answered,
what
because
you're,
one of my questions was the one that Casey actually asked. So thank you for that information. Also, could you provide us with the link of that asset 2021 information that somebody was just talking about, so that we could share that? But my question was more about the funding and how it's shared, and how do we find out, like, is there a document, is there a website, is there a place where you could actually look at what's allowed and what's not allowed in terms of sharing funding for certain services? I keep hearing, like, I keep asking questions to either my social worker or to the agencies, and they're like, well, that's not allowed, or that's allowed. But I'm wondering, where's the magic document that has all of these?
There isn't one. It's something we need to develop, and we need to talk with Medicaid to figure it out, on how it would work.
Okay, so is that,
Do you know anything about sharing, pooling of Medicaid resources in any other states, or, and how that might work?
are you asking me or somebody else?
No, David.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
You're looking at me. There's actually a number of different ways of approaching that. Back in around 78, 79, we created a service cooperative it's governed by the people who are supported and their families, so that it's not in the hands of an agency, it's in the hands of the people who care for the person. And what we accomplished was getting individualized funding for each of the people, but then managing that funding through the service co-op. And what service co-op was able to do was to create some of the staff training and backup and all of those sort of guardrail services. There's another form that we created in 1982 called a microboard, which is setting up a teeny tiny corporation which can actually stand as an agency in support of one person. And we did 2 of them in Winnipeg. There's now over 1,500 of them in the United States and Canada, which means that one jurisdiction, one state, one province after another have not only figured out how to do that, how to fund them, but also that there's real value in those kinds of solutions, because they work for the people, they work for the families, and so on. And it's basically building a circle of support, as John and Connie were speaking about, and then having possibly 3 members of that circle saying, we will do this, we'll play the special role of serving as officers in this little corporation, along with the person who's at the center. So there are a number of and then what we've done in other places is build a container for multiple microboards, and the container is like a microboard association, which can then handle help folks handle payroll and human resources issues and training and things like that. So there are a number of different approaches toward that. And again, what we're trying to do is get as many resources directly into the hands of the people and their families as possible. Provide ways for folks to cooperate around specialized capabilities like HR and payroll and so on, and backup staffing, and at the same time have the flexibility that people need as their lives change, as their interests change, as their locations and their needs change. so, and into that combination of individualized funding and then finding effective ways of collaborating in terms of how that's managed and how that's supported, are all not only available in a pipe dream, they are, they've been field tested and road tested for decades now.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
So I know we're coming up on having 10 minutes left tonight. And again, if this is something you're interested in, we'd love to do it more. I don't know, David, can you just put in the chat the link to where people can see the videos of our meetings, the past meetings, and maybe where we might be able to put up? I know like John sent out information about affordable housing, just so the people who haven't been involved can access that information. And I put my email address in the chat so people can always get in touch with me. But tonight I've heard and we will look into definitely, and Ann and I had started working on this previously, but shared resources, because it seems like people are interested in how you come about with some model of home ownership. And again, it could be through partner with the Community Development Corporation. It could be partnering with a group of families that you're interested. I mean, there's different models. And I think when you see all of the variety of models we've talked about, you might have interest in those too. And we can start that. Like I said, there was a presentation last time on co-ops, and if people are interested in that, we had the deputy director of Rhode Island Housing on the call, and he's worked in Massachusetts and Connecticut where they've done these types of models before. So if there are people interested, he said, Michelle, bring them to me and I will, we'll start to have conversations about that. Co-housing is another model, but we definitely know people are interested in this home ownership model. We want to find out information on what that would look like, legally, to protect everyone. We definitely know people want to know about shared service packages and how we do that. So again, we're at the beginning. We're at the beginning stages of doing that, but we have open minds and we want to think outside the box.
And I'll
say the pooling of resources, also, it doesn't have to be in a home someone owns. It could happen in a place they're renting as well.
Yeah.
And Melanie, I think the answer you're going to get, I'm not surprised, is that that isn't allowed because we haven't defined it. I don't know that it's really not allowed, or as much as it's something we haven't done and we haven't defined. So we definitely want to look into how to pool resources and try to define that.
Yep. And anytime you get an answer that says, when you get the answer that something's not allowed, just bring it to me and bring it to Ann, because I just think, you're right. And we've done all the models that we've talked about. Rhode Island has, except for co-ops. Well, we do have one co-op. We've done all the models that have been brought to us. We've just done them for different populations. We typically do them for individuals honestly experiencing homelessness. And I've worked in the field for 25 years because that's where the other federal funds are coming from that match them. So everything we've heard about, we've done in Rhode Island already. We just need to make it work for this population. So we're ahead of the game in some aspects. We just need to make people aware of what's out there as far as community-based housing. So you're aware of all the various options that are available. I will put in a plug that we always need people out there to advocate for more funding and more dollars. And there is affordable housing bond and a special election that's coming up that I think John gave information to everyone about, but that's important because in order to ensure that there's different housing models out there that are affordable to everyone, we need to make sure we're putting the money aside for that.
And we are need to work on defining things better in our state. John and I kind of had different takes on the idea of a group hiring the agency, to Casey's question previously. And to me, I see it as the individuals are still hiring. They're just hiring the agency that then hires the staff. So people are working for, the staff aren't, they're not the employer of the staff, but they're employer of employing the agency. We do need to be careful with that, however, because yes, does state who should be in control of what decisions. And we wouldn't want that line to be crossed where an agency starts setting the schedule and doing other things, or people
Exactly.
that no one in the house knows are being sent in on a regular basis.
Right. One of the
The
powerful
relationships
things.
need to be carefully defined.
Yeah, one of the powerful things about the micro model is that you get to control who comes in your front door.
Yeah.
And I know that those staff relationships are essential, and they're worth protecting. Michelle, I've posted, first of all, the link to to one definitive answer on when your home can be excluded as an asset under SSI and Medicare and so on. I'm going to have to send you the link to the movies. I'm unable to reach that at the moment,
Okay.
but I'll send that, and then you can send it out to everybody else.
Yeah, and if people just send me an email, then I'll have yours. I've written them down, but sometimes I can't read my own writing the next day. So, sorry.
Can I just, as we wrap up, I just want to say something, reinforce a little bit of what this is all about. This is really all about is kind of creating some vision about the future for our families. And for a long time, this is going to sound a little radical, but some of you know that that's what you get from me. For a long time, disability policy has been dictated by what is allowed. My own personal radical view is what is allowed is what we ask for. And until we begin asking for new questions and new ideas, nothing new will ever be allowed. And I need to back this up another generation, and that is, here we are, all of us are parents, which is great. We care about our kids, we love our kids, but when we're talking about where our children will live and what their living circumstances will be like, they are critical to making those visionary decisions. One of the things that Kathy Ludlam really emphasized to us a month or two ago was that it starts with the vision. Her vision was she wanted to live in a place that was not a nursing home, that was not controlled by other people. She wanted to live in her community. She wanted to live where she grew up. She wanted to live in a way that allowed her to control her own life. And so my advice is it's never too early to have those kinds of conversations. It's a mistake, I believe, to accept the answer, I don't know, or to accept the answer, whatever you think, because you might, as a parent, might be able to control that and massage that now, but once you're gone, you're not going to control it. You're not going to know. I got to turn this stuff off. And it'll become more and more important.
Anybody wants to know.
Yeah, that's the good, bad, and the ugly. That's kind of what you get when you get me. Anyway, my point is, it's really important to help them think about this, experience it, and never, never, never let them be locked into one answer. We did Home of Your Own here in Rhode Island. It worked for a small number of people. It failed for a small number of people. And the reason it failed is that the relationships that were created were built on the assumption that, they love each other. They're going to get along just great. They've been in school together all these years. Well, remember, they were in school together all those years because they were forced to be in school all those years. Now they're adults and their world is changing. So be careful. The other thing that happened that caused a lot of failures, I don't know how to describe it, except for describe it as the in-law effect. Sometimes the individuals with disabilities got along fine, but the parents disagreed about how support and services would be shared. Who would get what? Whose milk was going to be drunk tonight? Whose staff is going to be watching over who? And those seem like trivial questions, but like in the in-law model, it can be catastrophic for the relationship. And sometimes people were locked in and that whole thing failed. So be flexible, be open, and especially be aware of what your children want and need. Our plan view is very simple. We want to promote fully inclusive lives for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we want to help families maneuver their future options in ways that will allow that to happen. We have unfortunately seen people who have created trusts and then discovered that the house was an albatross around their child's neck, around their trustee's neck, around all kinds of problems that nobody anticipated, including very smart lawyers. So don't rush, take your time, talk to people, keep participating in these kinds of things, and talk with each other and us, and we'll work on it. We're really lucky. We've got Anne and Michelle who are very open to listening and are very, very experienced, and we're grateful for them. And David forever has been one of the role models that we have as a family have looked to as a great source of wisdom. And I'm excited that there's so many of you on this who want to work on solving problems. Each one is different, and each one probably has many different ways of being addressed. But the greater the flexibility, the greater the potential for solution. So thank you all for coming. This was such a big success that for sure we're going to do this again. Stay tuned, and we will let you know when the next one of these things is happening. If you come back next week, you're going to learn about how to recognize housing discrimination. There's lots of things that you got to be aware of when you're thinking about housing, and one of them is
speaking, hon.
Pardon,
Angel,
what?
tell them who's speaking.
Sure. So I happen to be the chairman of the Rhode Island Commission for Human Rights, and I'm having two of our staff members, one of whom has a disability himself, and the other one is someone who has been in the fair housing world for about 35 years. They're going to talk about housing discrimination, how to recognize it, what to do about it, how to avoid it. One of the blatant problems that people have to face is that even when you're given a Section 8 voucher, at this point in time, landlords can refuse to accept it. Even though it's as good as money, in fact, it's often better than money, they use that as an excuse and don't want to have people with disabilities in their buildings because they perceive them as potential problem. So they'll say, oh, I'd love to have you, but I don't accept Section 8 vouchers. In many states, that's illegal. We're working in Rhode Island to make that illegal also. And if you're anticipating needing to use Section 8 vouchers, I think you're going to want to make sure that those vouchers are accepted when you finally wait after 5 years to get one. And then you're told you only have 3 months to use it. And then everyone's saying, no, we don't accept it. We don't accept it. and then you lose it. We don't want that to happen. We want that when you have it, we want people to say, of course we'll take it. And of course we'll have your son or daughter live here. If you have not been a regular, please send me your email and I will put you on our regular, and I'll send you out all kinds of information about that. If you've registered, we now have captured some information about your email, and we'll keep updating that. So thank you, everybody. It's been
Thanks, John.
great.
Thank you
We'll
very
see you
much.
all next week.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Take care.
Thanks,
Good
Michelle.
night.
Bye-bye.
Hope to see you next week.
Thank you, everyone.